Good morning. After a night's sleep, I think I can truthfully say that my visit to Iceland's Reykjanes volcano yesterday feels even more special now I have more time to reflect upon it. So what was it like? Well, first of all, there is the trip to get to the volcano, the hike that takes about 75 minutes to the first vantage point, and then about up to another 30 minutes to get to the second vantage point, or maybe 20 to 30 minutes for those that walk at an average pace. And the good news is anybody in reasonable shape can make this trip. You just need, for your own comfort and safety, to prepare a few things in advance, as you would for any hike through mountains. And I have walked I've walked up to the top of Snowdon in Wales, I've walked in the Brecon Beacons, and I would say that this particular mountain hike is certainly easier than Snowdon by far, and you're also climbing less, only about 250 metres to the first vantage point and around 300 metres to the second vantage point. But there are, as happens in all mountainous terrains, but particularly so when you've got an erupting volcano that many people say has almost a little micro climate around its peak, there is the need to prepare well for your own comfort with layers of clothing. It was so warm at the bottom that I actually walked wearing just a sports shirt, but I think I was the only person wearing shirt sleeves. I'm really someone who's, when I'm active, I don't feel I seem to feel the cold less than most people, even Icelandic people. But I certainly needed my layers of clothing higher up, and a decent pair of boots are the only other equipment you need. Some people used walking poles, the Nordic walking poles. I didn't, but if you like using them, they are helpful. The only other thing that adds greatly to your comfort on the journey is some snacks and a drink, and making sure that you can adjust your clothing quite easy and have it handy in a small backpack, and of course to keep your camera handy at all times, because even on the walk up through the mountains it's very beautiful. You can't actually see it until you get near the first vantage point, but before that you can hear it. As you're getting closer you can hear it, and that sound for me is a little bit like excuse me, very distant rolling thunder, or perhaps the thunderous sound that we can hear when we're approaching a very powerful waterfall. I know that I heard that sound when I was approaching the Dettifoss waterfall some years ago, and it doesn't sound like moving water, it's just a sound. And then there is the vibration that you feel through the earth when you're fairly close to the volcano. I could feel that, and again, it's like the feeling that you have close to a waterfall. It's nothing like an earthquake. There were no earthquakes that were perceptible at all, so nobody needs to worry about that at the moment. Basically, the earthquakes, the big ones, stopped when the eruption got going, and the small ones, you're not going to feel those anyway. So every footstep I felt was taking me closer to my goal of seeing an erupting volcano, something that so few people can do in their lifetime. So I knew it was really special. I'd seen the video coverage and watch it every day. I also would go and watch the volcano from the local coastline, since it has been visible from there. And this is an unusual volcano because at the moment Some people describe it as a fire geyser because it erupts in bursts and then stops for between 2 and 10 minutes. So you never have to wait very long to witness it. And on the climb up, it was wonderful to see everybody walking backwards and forwards. It wasn't crowded, but it wasn't lonely. You never felt, I'm in the middle of nowhere and I'm alone, because you could always see several other people. And there were always search and rescue people going back and forth, so they were never far away, and it was very well managed. And some improvements have been made to the path, which makes the surface more stable. And it was just wonderful. I waited several weeks to go. Either it wasn't convenient, I didn't have anyone to go with at the time that I could go, or, there was just something else that got in the way. But at the end of last week, I thought, right, I am going next Thursday. It's time for me to go. And I was so pleased that I did. And even the weather conditions, I was fortunate, because in the morning there was heavy rain, and that wouldn't have prevented me, but it's nicer without. And at the end, as I was walking back down, visibility was not quite so good, and it was snow turned to drizzle. So what was it like? Well, every twist and turn on the pathway, you're getting closer. And that's a lovely feeling. But there is the joy of just walking through the mountains. And then you arrive at the first vantage point, and you can actually see the lava pouring out of the earth when there is a surge. And that is so special, so amazing. And it's not a feeling that I can put into words, or that can perhaps be conveyed in photographs. But there's a feeling of the great power of the earth. But also, even as the fire is pouring out, for me at least, there was a feeling of peace, a feeling of steadiness, a feeling of witnessing something special, and the wonder of nature, and the privilege of being present at this wonderful, magical happening. I felt quite humble, as I'm sure many people do. But to know that we are all humble in the face of the earth and its mysterious ways and its mysterious beauties was a moment that I'm sure will stay with me for the rest of my days. Whatever I witness in the coming years, even if I live to be 100, I'm sure this will be one of a handful of days that I will count amongst my most precious ones. A day when in many ways, the 4 hours or so that it took to make the round trip, and if you want to go to the second vantage point, which I recommend because it will give you a different spectacular view that in some ways is more spectacular because you can see the cascade of the lava as it pours out in a way that you can't really see it the same with the first point that you're able to view this. But both are wonderful, so if you don't feel able to make the extra trek, or you don't want to, or you don't have the time, it doesn't matter. The round trip to the first vantage point, you could do it in about 3 hours, provided you're in reasonable shape. And I say reasonable shape. I am not super fit. I just walk regularly and do a few exercises. So, I'm very ordinary. I'm a very ordinary woman in late middle age in that regard. But it was no trouble at all to walk up there. And so totally worth it. And then as you walk to the second vantage point, you will see a lot more of the lava field, although of course that can be seen from the first viewing point as well. And the lava is very, very, in this field, is very, very thick, partly because it is quite dense, viscous lava, we are told, but it's just built up layer upon layer. But it has advanced also over a very, very large area. That much is obvious. The Geldinga Dala lava is sort of pushing in the direction of Nauthahi and in the direction of the coast, but it's quite far from the coast at the moment, and it probably will remain quite far from the coast. But looking at the shape of the valley, you can see why people say, the experts know that it could head in that direction. That's where it would go if it just carried on flowing over a long period of time. But that's not something to think about at the moment. And many people walked down to have a closer look at the lava field, and you could do that if you wanted. But I carried on up onto the brow of the hill to the highest point, not just for the best view, but the reason I wouldn't go down was quite simply that the volcanic gases were making me cough a little bit and were making my eyes water. And it is recommended that if you have any sensitivity, that you don't go to the low-lying areas, or if you're at all concerned, that you don't go to those areas where the gases will be greatest. But it wasn't discomfort, it was just very mild irritation. And to come back to the wonders of nature, as I was leaving the first viewing point to go to the second one, sleet started to fall, and of course by then it had got colder, and I had put on more of my another layer, and then I added a waterproof coat as well because the sleet was quite wet, and carried on to the second viewing point, which of course is probably about 50 metres higher, and you're that much closer to the volcano, but you're still, I think, possibly, at least 200 metres, possibly 400 metres, I'm guessing, and because of the topography of the land, it's difficult to guess distance, but that's what I would guess. And it started to snow, just whispers of snow, nothing heavy, nothing troubling, but that snow had a surreal quality because it had a blue tinge. And when I first saw it, I caught a snowflake in my hand, and I was relieved that it was cold and it melted. And I think what happens is that the ash from the volcano goes up into the cloud and taints, the snow with ash. That's the explanation that I can come up with. I've no idea whether that's what actually happens or not. But to have these little snowflakes that were silvery blue, sort of wafting on the breeze as I watched the volcano erupt from the closest safe point. It was just extraordinary. That's the only word I can use, is extraordinary. I run out of superlatives to describe it, but there was also the feeling of standing before nature's temple of fire and feeling this reverence, feeling very, very small in a way, but very, very special because I was able to be there. And how many people can say that, really? That they can be present at one of nature's more extreme moments. And I hope, if it is your wish, that you're able to see the volcano. It is said that it is now more likely that it is going to be erupting for some time. But of course it is impossible to say for sure.